Welcome to the Hobothanga podcast, everyone. My name is Crystal Cedino, and I am the Training and Development Manager here at the Native Learning Center. I'm so thrilled that y'all are tuning in for yet another episode. With me today is my lovely co-host, Cora Anthony. Say hi, Cora.
Hi, everybody. I'm Cora Anthony, the Training and Development Specialist here at the Native Learning Center.
And today on the show, we have very special guests. One y'all should feel fairly familiar with now, but I'll go ahead and introduce everyone. So with us, we have Laurel Levier, the Assistant Administrator for the Telecommunications Programs with the Rural Utility Service at USDA Rural Development. Go ahead and wave to the camera, Laurel. There she is. And then additionally, we have Edjael Casperalta, who is the Senior Policy Advisor for the Rural Utility Service at USDA Rural Development. There she is, she's waving away. And then returning for another wonderful episode, we have Ted Bulow, the Tribal Coordinator for USDA Rural Development. Go ahead and wave, Ted.
Hi, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you so much for returning. And thank you to our two lovely additional guests who are here volunteering their wonderful time and expertise on everything that we're going to be discussing today. So with that, today's topic is USDA rural development, broadband programs, specialty specifically the ReConnect program, which just announced over $1 billion available in funds for projects that propose to connect rural communities, including tribal lands, which, as you all know, are near and dear to our hearts. So with that, let's go ahead and dive in. All right. So question number one. So as we know, USDA recently announced its third round of funding throughout the ReConnect program, which makes $1.15 billion available for projects to build broadband infrastructure in rural communities. Can you please share with us what the program is and the key dates our listeners should be aware of?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Crystal. And good morning, everybody. My name is Laurel Leverrier. I'm the Assistant Administrator of our telecommunications programs. Yes, the ReConnect program is intended to help extend broadband service in communities that currently don't have service today. We've completed 2 rounds of funding over the last 2 years and have been able to award almost $1.5 billion in funding through those 2 rounds. This third round, as you mentioned, will include $1.15 billion in available loan and grant funds. It's our biggest round yet. What we're trying to do here is provide loan and grant funding to entities to extend broadband service in communities that don't have service. And as we go into this third round, we've made some key changes to the program, one of which is how we defined communities that are eligible for this program. We have increased the speed threshold for unserved. So today, we're looking to serve communities that don't have service today at 100 megabits over 20 megabits. So that's a big change for our program. Our goal is to open a lot of communities for this program so that we can help support their infrastructure needs. We know communities, homes, businesses today need robust broadband service. And so that's one of the key drivers for why we made that critical change. All entities which receive funding under this program will be expected to build out networks that can produce and deliver service at 100 megabits upstream and downstream, meaning really, really robust networks that can ensure homes have the facilities that they need to take advantage of distance learning, telemedicine, and to hopefully also different economic benefits. We know a lot of businesses are run out of homes. We know a lot of businesses start out of homes, and we know businesses in rural and tribal communities also need broadband service today. So that's our goal, is to reach those communities. We have we are getting ready to open our grant window. So we just recently issued our funding opportunity announcement Department, which outlines the rules and requirements for the program, tells people how to apply, and the various priorities that we are giving to projects this year. We will begin to accept applications on November 24th. I know, not the smartest date, the day before Thanksgiving. We all got a lot to do, right? But the good news is folks have 90 days to apply. So we will be accepting applications from November 24th until February 22nd of 2022. 2/22/22, pretty easy for me to remember at least. So anyway, we're very excited for this third round. It'll be our biggest one yet. And we are hoping to see a lot of great applications that can serve tribal communities that we know need this service very today. Ed, JL, or Ted, anything you would add?
That was a great response. The only date that I'll add to that is not a date you'll ever see published, but the best time to contact rural development, your general field representative, anyone you see on this call, is now. Whenever you're watching this podcast, regardless if it's after, even if it's after 2/22/22, the best time to get in contact with us about our broadband programs is when you're ready to. Because the sooner we're at the table, the sooner we can explain our programs a little more in depth than we're going to be able to get to today. And you can start sort of calculating, well, how does this fit into our broadband plan? So no matter when you're listening, if you don't know who to contact, we'll talk about contacts at the end, but it's always a good time to get to know our staff locally that can really give you the assistance you need on your broadband plans.
Awesome, thank you. Cora is quite familiar with broadband issues. She used to be a teacher on our Big Cypress reservation at the school over there. So internet is a bit of a hardship, I think, throughout Indian country in general. So guys and gals, if you can apply and you have ideas, do it, please. Let's get internet out to our tribal members and communities. Cora, I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton to you, ma'am.
For sure, no, and thank you for bringing that up. As I was listening to you guys speak, I was thinking of my time there, and when COVID hit, how difficult it was to get the kids engaged, not because they didn't want to, but they didn't have the resources. They didn't have the connectivity for those that lived on the reservation to attend online classes and to participate. So I'm really thrilled that these programs do help tribal communities. So that brings me to our next question. This round of ReConnect encourages participation from tribal applicants. Can you guys tell us how?
Hi, and thank you for that amazing question, Cora. I'm Ejael Casaperalta, Senior Policy Advisor at Rural Utility Service, and it's a pleasure to be here with you both. Thank you for hosting us and letting us share with you about the exciting components of the ReConnect program for this round. So that's exactly right. ReConnect is encouraging participation from tribal applicants, and we're really excited to partner with tribal governments, with tribal internet providers, tribal nonprofits, and tribal institutions that are interested in working to close the digital divide. The Biden-Harris administration is focused on reaching 100% connectivity in our nation and ensuring that rural communities, including tribal communities, have access to affordable and reliable high-speed internet. So what we've done with this exciting third round of ReConnect is that we are actually providing the most grant funding available in our rounds. We are providing a total of $700 million in grants alone. Now, those $700 million are broken up in two buckets. $350 million will be in grants that have a 25% matching requirement. And then another $350 million is actually a grant set aside with no matching requirement that has been set aside for tribes and socially vulnerable communities. We know, and we've heard through tribal consultations, that a big barrier for tribal applicants to participate in our program is that 25% match. And we wanted to make sure that in this round, we remove that barrier that encourage participation. So $350 million grant alone are set aside for tribes and social vulnerable communities. But remember, there's $700 million in total in grants. Another component that we have updated for our ReConnect program is that we are also awarding additional points to applications that are submitted or proposed by tribal governments and applications that serve tribal lands. Again, this is, to demonstrate our desire to partner with tribal governments, with tribal entities to close the digital divide on tribal lands. You know the digital divide better than anybody on your lands. You know what it does, you know the needs, you know the opportunities, and you know the players, right? So you have all the information, and we just want to make sure that your applications also get additional support. So we'll be awarding those 15 points to applications submitted by tribal governments, and any application that is submitted that is proposed to serve a tribal land will also get 10 additional points. So those are some of the exciting changes we have in this time, and we hope to see a lot of tribal applicants participate.
And I'll just take the chance to underscore some things that Ejiel said, because it's a historic moment. It's a historic moment in lots of different ways. But for our programs, we've never had this type of tribal set aside in our telecom programs. We've had points for tribes before, and we've had points for tribal applicants. Not only is this a bucket that's set aside for tribes, but it's a pretty large bucket. $350 million is over a third of what we're offering in the total, and it's half the grants, to Ejiel's point. So really historic moment. I couldn't be more pleased or thrilled with my colleagues for making that happen, and thank Ejiel and Laurel for their work in actually making that happen, because it's not easy. So thank you.
Cora coming in with the hand clap. I love it. Awesome. Thank you, Ted and Ejiel. Definitely appreciate the both of you on expanding that. So with that, let's go even further. So what process do you have in place to ensure that non-tribal applicants that propose to serve tribal lands are cooperating with tribes on those proposed projects? Because as we know, that seems to be quite a bit of a touchy experience, or, just experience. So can you all go ahead and expand on that?
Yeah, let me take let me give it a try first, and then I'll invite my colleagues to chime in. Yes, we know that we heard it through various consultations with tribal leaders and representatives that they felt they were being left out of projects that were meant to serve their tribes and their tribal lands and their communities. And so for this round, we had already incorporated this in our previous programs. We encourage our applicants that are serving tribal lands to collaborate with the governments of those lands in developing their broadband projects. And for this round, we went one step further, right? So we are making it a requirement of any project that is proposing to serve a tribal land to obtain a resolution of consent from the appropriate tribal government of those lands. We are doing this in addition, to this making good sense. Is just we are upholding our trust responsibility as a federal agency, and embracing the call to consult with tribal governments that President Biden affirmed in one of his memos early in the administration, asking us to consult with tribal governments when it comes to developing policies and projects that affect tribal governments and tribal lands. And so this upholds our respect for tribal sovereignty, encourages our participants in our programs to collaborate with tribal governments in that, and ensures that tribal governments and representatives get a seat at the table when it comes to infrastructure that is being built in their own lands. So we're really excited to see this, and we want to highlight that any applicant, that includes a tribal applicant, right, that wants to serve a tribal land, they got to make sure that they have permission from the tribal government as well. And we also want to highlight that this means that for tribal governments, as we want them to be involved in this process, and they will likely be asked to approve projects or consider projects that come their way for the ReConnect program. So tribal leaders out there, tribal councils, be aware that people will come asking for your participation, for your consideration to submit a ReConnect application. So get ready to be part of these conversations.
Yeah, and I'd add a couple things. I mean, first, we've always sort of thought of this as a threshold issue. It's one thing to get a tribe's consent to put in an application, but an applicant that maybe tried to circumvent that in the past, they weren't able to build across tribal lands because it would be trespassing. So if an applicant came in even in the past, we were always thinking, well, will that really work? What permission do they have from the tribe? So this consent through a tribal resolution up front ensures that's in place on both sides of the table for those projects that are coming in from non-tribal applicants. So really pleased to see that as part of the application requirements. It's a requirement. It's a threshold requirement for those projects that are going to be serving tribal lands. A sort of second thing that can think about, I know Laurel said, you're going to have from November 24th to 2/22/22. So you're going to have some time to apply. Well, when you think about that logistically, with the holidays sprinkled in, that might be 3 or 4 tribal council meetings where you're able to come together and vote. Virtual council meetings, I don't know how that's working in your specific community, but you'll have to get consent from the tribe to pass that resolution. So factor that in if you want to work with a non-tribal applicant, because that's perfectly reasonable. If it makes more sense for your community to work with an existing provider that already has the infrastructure set up to apply for funding and build certain projects, if that's the solution that works for your community for whatever reason, that's great. But just know that they're not going to be eligible unless they have that tribal resolution that comes in with your application. So just keep that in mind, because the wheels of government, as we all know, take some time to make things happen. So thank you.
We are all too familiar with that. When we apply for our grant, we need a tribal resolution as well. So we totally understand that. And I love that that requirement has been made, because I feel like now it's starting to make strides as far as protecting our communities, and we're not just allowing things to happen anymore. It's like, no, you need this in order to move forward, and without it, you're not going anywhere. So I love that idea or that requirement that's there. So Cora, go ahead.
For sure. And as as our tribal communities dive deep into this and start looking more into how can I apply, what additional outreach materials or resources are you guys going to provide to tribal applicants?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, I would really encourage folks to take a look at our website, usda.gov/reconnect. We have a lot of information that's available regarding areas that are eligible for funding. We have a map where you can see different information about communities. And we have a lot of information regarding just the nuts and bolts of how to apply. So we have a really robust website that I would encourage folks to take a look at. We are in this virtual environment going to be doing a lot of online activities. In the past, we have done online webinars mixed in with some in-person workshops. As we are still all sort of, getting used to this new normal, and things aren't quite back to normal, we are going to maintain a virtual environment and as we are doing our outreach. So as we move forward in this round, you're going to see us do 3 workshops, but those are all going to be virtual. So anyone across the country can participate. They won't be all day long. We're going to, have materials that are available all week. And then additionally, we have a number of webinars right now. They're pretty high level where we're focusing on just sort of the overarching points of how the program works, what the priorities are. As we move and we get into the actual application window, we'll start doing some webinars that are really focused on the financial feasibility, the technical feasibility, some of these really nuts and bolts of how to apply. At the same time, we're going to be doing some very targeted outreach to our tribal communities. We were hoping to do a couple in-person events. But again, given where we're at today with COVID, those are going to be online. But we do have a couple events that we're looking at hosting. And for folks that are interested, we're hoping that you'll be able to participate in those with us in a virtual way. I also wanted to make one plug for our general field representatives that we have located all across the country. USDA, one of the things we take a lot of pride in is our personal touch. We have 25 general field representatives located across the country. If you go to our website, you can find the person's name, phone number, and email address where you can contact them for the person for your state. It's not just a 1-800 number where you got to keep dialing and finding whatever your thing is. There's a real person, there's a real phone number, a real email address. Similarly, when you go to our website or once we open our application intake system, we have a contact us portal so you can submit questions. You will not get phony, just, automated responses back. Those questions come to my team and you will get human people looking at your questions, answering them back. So again, that personal touch is something that we encourage folks to take advantage of. And then Ted, I think, did a really good job of mentioning earlier, and I'll just mention it again, which is reach out early. If you have any interest in this program, if you are a community that needs service, we want to be talking to you. Don't wait until February 21st. Reach out to us today. We would love to be part of helping you to figure out what that solution is for your community. JL or Ted?
I'll jump in. I would add that a lot of our resources are malleable as well. And what I mean that is we can add additional information to, like, our frequently asked questions, for instance. So if there's a specific recurring tribal question that we've heard in the past, we've always added that in. So if there's something that you don't feel like you're getting quite all the information you need, just let us know, because we can adapt those materials as we go as well. And I was struck with a bit of nostalgia as I was listening to Laurel. The last time I saw Laurel in person, which feels like probably 100 years ago at this point, was at the workshop for round 2 for ReConnect when we were in Seattle together. So a lot of water has gone under that bridge since March 2020. I guess that was probably February 2020. But I can remember being on that plane and being worried about the virus, frankly. And we were all traveling and just learning about the virus at that point. And it has not been a normal stretch for any of us. And I know Indian country's been hit particularly hard with COVID, but we look forward to a more normal day when we're able to meet in person again. And I'll just offer, as far as those initial meetings, there's a name and a phone number and an email address on the website, but we can also provide a personal touch. I can specifically provide a personal touch with those introductions. And I can be a part of conversations, and our tribal relations team can be a part of conversations with our general field representatives, so we can get you the answers you need in real time. Throughout our different program histories, and even throughout ReConnect 1 and round 2, when tribes contact us in real time and don't try to figure out the question on their own and bring resources to the table that can answer their questions, I found that to be successful. So never be shy to reach out personally as well. So thanks.
Absolutely. I think that's probably one of, and they haven't been released yet, but on a few of the other episodes that we've done with you, Ted, we've, mentioned, don't just assume or don't, think that something's not for you. Definitely. We're also, as a Native Learning Center, we're here to, if maybe you're shy or not sure, feel free to reach out to Cora and myself. We're all ordinary people. We can connect you to whomever, you need to be connected to. So definitely ask those questions and make use of that website, definitely. But moving forward, I think this is probably going to be one of my favorite questions that we have, because I love hopes and dreams. I love hearing them. But what are your hopes for the ReConnect program and helping close the digital divide in Indian country, because it is such a problem?
Yeah, I think I'll take the first swing at that, responding to that question. As our listeners know, there's been a lot of new programs that have been developed to address the digital divide in Indian country over the last 18 months, and COVID has shown a light on how this is a need for communities. It's not a want. It's not something where you're going to get Netflix or even your Native Learning Center podcast. This is where you're going to get your education. This is where you're going to get your healthcare. This is where you're going to create jobs. This is where you're going to create economic opportunity for your community. So it's a need that's become quite visible outside of Indian country. And if I'm thankful for anything from COVID, it's sort of Congress and our country recognizing that and making new resources available. So we see our ReConnect program and our traditional programs as really complementing a lot of resources that are new that tribes are adapting to, applying for from other federal agencies, specifically NTIA's Tribal Broadband Grant Program. $1 billion was made available through that program over the last 7 months. Just this Friday, an infrastructure bill passed that's bringing $2 billion more through that Tribal Broadband Grant Program. So where I see us fitting in are those areas that Laurel mentioned that don't meet the minimum broadband requirements, so they're eligible for our areas. And those parts of your tribal community that you're not able to serve for whatever reason through other existing grants. We want to be a part of your options and how that's financed. And we want to make sure your tribe has the best, most robust internet connectivity as it can. And our grants and loan programs are there to make that happen. So really hopeful that we get some tribes interested and that we're able to help finally bridge that digital divide in Indian country.
Thank you for that, Ted. And I hear you mention that there's a lot of other programs. Can you tell me what other programs are available to encourage those investments in tribal areas? Oh, I'm sorry, Jael, were you going to say something? Go right ahead. I just got really excited about what he was saying. I was like, I want to know all these programs.
Yes, there are so many great programs. And I also wanted to see, like, Laura, do you have anything to add to the Hope question? I have some thoughts as well, but I wanted to see if you had other stuff to add.
No, jump in.
So I think, y'all, this is a really exciting time for tribal and rural broadband. I mean, there's funding available, there's funding that is coming down the pike. I think USDA has an exclusive mission out of all the federal agencies and our federal partners to serve rural areas, right? Like there are many important programs, but we are uniquely mandated to focus on rural communities. So I think when you discuss the digital divide that has persisted in rural areas, we know it really well, and we want to make sure that rural communities and tribal communities and rural areas are able to see us as a partner. So I think, when you talk about hopes, my hope, and I think the hope of our program is for tribal governments and for Indian country to see USDA as an important partner in closing the digital divide, right? We have the financing, we have some funds, some programs, a variety of programs that we'll get into. But this is such a unique time of possibility. And what I hope this leads to, as Ted, brilliantly pointed out, is not just the economic development, but podcasts like this make me really excited, right? Because in order to get this amazing content and cultural information out there, you require the infrastructure that allows you to do that. So my hopes for ReConnect is that we are a program that tribal leaders and the tribal community see as an important partner to get to information and spaces like this podcast, right? That are putting your stories out there, that are putting your content, that are uplifting the entrepreneurs in your communities, that are making connections and bridges that we couldn't have envisioned without your contribution to the digital life, right? To the sphere of digital content and information out there. So I'm really excited to see us partnering with Indian country and closing the digital divide, and really enjoying the information and contributions of tribal nations to our digital life. Also, I just wanted to plug in too that the ReConnect program provides funding for infrastructure in not just for today's infrastructure, but the infrastructure that will be needed in the future, right? So I think we want to be a partner, not just for this round of funding that is available right now, but for as tribal nations build their infrastructure, their broadband infrastructure, we want to partner 10 years and 15 years and 20 years down the road. So that's what I hope for our program and for this round. And there are so many other programs that we have. Well, we have 4 other programs that I think we can dive into. But thanks for that.
No, thank you. That I listened to you guys speak, and it reminds me of one of the episodes that we recorded where Ted said we're more than the people that stamp your meat. And so we really wanna bring that out there, that look at all of these programs, all these opportunities. And from being, like Crystal mentioned earlier, like being in it, in the communities and seeing the struggle, like these are the type of initiatives that we really need to bring into Indian country. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. So what are these other programs that you guys keep mentioning but don't speak of?
Well, Laura, why don't you start with our programs, and then I'll circle back to the other federal agencies.
That sounds like a great plan, because quite frankly, today there's a lot. And there's probably twice as many programs that we're going to talk about today that are available than existed a year ago. So that's why I think Ajail's point about why this is such an important time is a really good point to make. You know, I've been doing this for 17 years. Never in my career have I seen so much funding being put towards this issue. And at the same time, not just money. You have policymakers, you have local leaders, you have communities, you have schools, you have libraries. I mean, if you're in a community that doesn't have service, you suddenly also have a lot of other people who are willing to champion this issue because they're all seeing the same issue, which is we all can't move to that next level if we don't have broadband. We can't do the education, we can't have the economic development. So anyway, what are those other programs? At USDA, I have the pleasure of overseeing 5 telecommunications programs. One of those is ReConnect, which we spent quite a bit of time talking about. In addition to ReConnect, we have a number of other programs that are smaller, but also provide really great opportunities for tribal communities in particular. So number one, our Community Connect grant program is a program we've been operating since the early 2000s. It's similarly to ReConnect, is about providing grant funding to help extend broadband networks in unserved communities. It's a 100% grant program. Projects are limited to $3 million, so they're much smaller projects. They're limited to a community. And we don't normally get as much money in that program. But the kind of important takeaway I would say for folks is, even with ReConnect and some of these other things that folks are talking about, like the infrastructure bill and one-time bill, our Community Connect program, we've been operating since the early 2000s. So I would just remind folks of that program. We'll have that opportunity coming out hopefully in the late winter, early spring. But it's also a program that we hope will be here to continue to support communities. We've made a number of investments in tribal communities. And again, the big takeaway on Community Connect is 100% unserved, 100% grant program intended for individual communities. Additionally, we have our telecom loan program, which is a wonderful opportunity. It's for those that are looking at a loan funding to extend broadband network. Similarly, with our electric program, we do a lot of smart grid. So again, if you're looking for loan funds, our electric program and the smart grid opportunities there are great. And then the final other opportunity I'll mention at USDA is our distance learning and telemedicine grant program. It's another program we've been operating since the early 2000s. Unlike ReConnect and our other programs, it's not about extending broadband infrastructure. It's about the equipment needed for distance learning and telemedicine. So it can really complement these networks and help expand the outreach that we have. And it caters to primarily schools, school districts, and hospitals. Ted, do you want to talk about some of the other federal opportunities on broadband?
Yeah, and before I do that, just know that I think in Community Connect, well, I know in Community Connect, it's not something I think, that's where we've had our biggest impact in a broad range of tribal communities. We're going to talk about some examples here in a little bit where we've had some really deep, rich, robust experiences with tribes using our programs. And normally that started with Community Connect, or a lot of times it has. And even when that hasn't sort of progressed into using our other programs, we've gotten a lot of initial investments that have put in at the time high-speed internet. What high-speed internet was in 2001 is not the same as it was in 2020. So in 2001, we didn't know what the future held, but now we're trying to finance that future-proof, robust technology that tribes and rural communities are going to be able to use for the long term. But the point is that a lot of tribes have used Community Connect where there are those unserved areas. It's a great tool. And it's a bit of a lighter lift when it comes to applying for those funds and actually administering the funds. There's ways you can partner with entities and have sort of a community-focused connectivity project, which can really bear fruit in the real time, but also sort of be an antecedent or a predecessor to what's going to be coming down the line in the future. So other programs with other federal agencies. So I'm going to challenge Native Learning Center. You should probably invite some of these folks. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about our partner programs, but part of what we do, whether it's in the national office or our general field representatives, is we can refer you to other resources that were available as well. And it is a bit of a crazy mixing pot right now with all these programs out there, but I'd encourage folks that don't know about it, and I shouldn't assume people know about the Department of Commerce's NTIA Tribal Broadband Grant Program. That's the new program that existed in 2021 that never existed before. It had $1 billion available. They received $5 billion worth of applications in that first round of funding. Just with the infrastructure bill that recently passed, they received $2 billion more. $2 billion more dollars for that specific program, but still that's only about 3/5 of the need that they received in that first round of applications. And it's the need in Indian country is much more than $5 billion, at least some of the studies that I've read. So even with the $3 billion in the Tribal Broadband Grant Program at NTI, there's still not enough money. Even with our money, there's still not enough money. Some other considerations to keep in mind are FCC's programs. They have a lot of programs that are now available to make sure that broadband is affordable as well. Some of those are brand new, which just came out with the passage of the infrastructure bill. So I don't know exactly how that's going to play out, but FCC has been a player in that space. So if you could have FCC's Native American Affairs Office on a future podcast, that would be great. NTIA's staff would be great. Then there's also COVID and Rescue Plan Act money that tribal governments have that can be used for broadband infrastructure. And I guess the last one I'd mention is the Economic Development Administration has a specific Indigenous Communities program, which is really built towards business and job creation, but where that interface is with connectivity, there's some ability to use those funds as well. So that's a lot. And I like I said, I'd recommend, if you can, try to get them on as guests to talk about their opportunities as they unfold in the months ahead as well.
Yeah, Ted, the only other thing I'd add to that is, and it's not specifically for tribal communities, but the Treasury Department also has some funding for broadband. But I can't emphasize enough the work over at NTIA with their infrastructure grant program, and then also potential other funding through the infrastructure bill. I think that absolutely, I would completely agree with Ted in that NTIA, FCC, Treasury, all of which, and you're going to be hearing more and more rolling out from them in the coming months about the other and future funding opportunities. So again, back to Adele's point, if you need funding for broadband, this is a good time to be looking for funding and assistance. So to support development activities that are going on, right? That our programs are nothing if people aren't applying for our programs. Same thing with all of them.
There's one thing that we haven't added yet, which can be very confusing for applicants, so I don't want to spend too much time on it during the podcast, but it's a really critical question to ask your general field representative or us up front, is what other funding has been made available to serve areas nearby or your tribal community? I think something that's a little different in round 3 of ReConnect with those higher broadband thresholds of 100 megabyte, over 20 megabyte as being sort of, do you have sufficient broadband? If it's under either of those, you don't, we can help fund it. That's going to help us to complement areas that historically don't have that robust internet service in a different way than we've been able to do in the past. We still can't duplicate funds for the same type of project in the same area, but we are trying to be more complementary to not only current subsidy that's available, but past awards that have maybe built some infrastructure near or close to your reservation. So that's a pretty tricky question, and it's not a straightforward answer. So getting in touch with us on that specific question early on in your planning is also a very important point I want your listeners to take away.
Absolutely. Thank you all for that. Oh, I'm excited. Now, what makes me even more excited are talking about projects that are or have been successful. So with that being said, what are some examples of successes within Indian country as it relates to broadband? Go.
Well, thanks for that question. We're going to do something a little differently here and have a visual up for those that are going to be able to join the podcast and watch the actual stream version with the video. For those that aren't, it's not that big a deal. I'll talk through all of the points that we've listed, but it's always a little awkward talking about the successes of other communities. But these are successes that we've been happy to play a part with in our financing, our loan and grant programs over time. And just know that we're not bragging about these investments. We're celebrating these investments that show tribes using our programs in great ways, with the hopes that it'll connect a few synapses out there and people think, oh, I could maybe do that same thing. Or our tribe could also participate and benefit from a program, participate in and benefit from a program in a similar way. So first example is the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs Reservation out in Oregon. The reason I love this story is that it's an ongoing story, but just in this example, we're going to talk about 15 years of support that we were able to provide in different touch points with the tribe over a decade and a half. So the story, at least for this example, starts in 2002, when we did make a Community Connect grant, which was just under $700,000 to bring in the first high-speed internet network, which was a small fiber network on the reservation, and it helped fund a technology center where the community could come in and access that internet for a certain amount of hours, a certain number of days a week. From that, they actually came in and used a couple of our business programs after that first investment. The first was a Rural Business Development Grant, which at the time was called something different, but today that program is called the Rural Business Development Grant. The first was to look at sort of entrepreneurial opportunities and utilizing an online marketplace and building jobs and in-home businesses across the reservation. And the second RBDG, the Rural Business Development Grant that we provided, was to the tribes so that they could look at the feasibility of owning and operating their own telecommunications company. And over the preceding years, building up to 2010, the tribe did decide to incorporate and create their own telecommunications company. It's currently called the Warm Springs Telecom Company. And then when 2010 came along, Rural Development at the time and other federal agencies, some of which have already been mentioned, received an influx of funding through the Recovery Act. And we had a program called the Broadband Initiatives Program, or BIP, where the tribe came in and was able to build out a reservation-wide hybrid fiber wireless network to serve their entire community. That's not where the story ends, because we also helped the tribe with a pretty large community facility loan. That loan did not go directly to the tribe. It went to a school district that the tribe partners with, but they have a tribally administered school called the Warm Springs Academy for their tribal members and their tribal kids to go to school at, which, because of the previous investments, is all hooked up, high-speed internet for those kids So I'm hopeful that that helped them at least through those dark COVID months when people had to learn from home. And in one of our later investments, we tried another rural business development grant for a business incubator. And guess what? Every one of those businesses in that incubator is going to be hooked up with high-speed broadband because of the building foundational bricks that the tribe put in place. So it's a really neat example of our programs being present at the right time for a tribe over a decade and a half. And that's not to mean everything went easy over those 15 years. It's a living, breathing community that faced lots of challenges over those times. But we've tried to be responsive, and we've really benefited from that long-term partnership with Warm Springs. Second example we'll mention is the Pueblo of Acoma. They received a ReConnect grant in our first round of funding. They're using that grant to build a fixed wireless broadband network. And at the time of award, the whole area that they were serving didn't have sufficient access to broadband. And through our investments, they're looking to bring more economic development, job opportunities, and high-speed broadband to over 770 households that are spread out across the 22 square miles at the Pueblo of Acoma. This picture is kind of interesting because it's a picture of the wellness center at the Pueblo of Acoma, which we also helped finance, which is also circa Recovery Act. But guess what? It's also going to be connected to that high-speed network. So another example where we've had a couple touch points with a particular tribe. And then we'll end with this example of Hopi Telecommunications Incorporated. There are a number, the number is still under 15, as far as I know, of tribally owned telecommunications companies. And where those companies have existed, Rural Development's been a long-term partner to many of those tribally owned telecommunications companies. Others include Mescalero Apache Telecom, Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe Telephone Authority. Gila River was a borrower at one time, but for this example, we really want to talk about what we've done at Hopi Telecom. And a lot of times these companies actually started with a telecom loan from Rural Development, and they purchased the assets of an existing telecom with a loan from us and got into the business of providing telecommunications services to their tribal members. And that's exactly what Hopi Telecom did probably about 20, 30 years ago now. And they've come back for successive loans to modernize and expand their system over the years. The latest loan they got through the telecom loan program from Rural Utility Service is just under $6 million. It's going to bring state-of-the-art fiber to 3 communities across the Hopi Reservation. Just for those that you don't know, it's in a remote part of Arizona, fully surrounded by the Navajo Nation. And it's pretty rugged terrain, which many tribal communities can relate with. And so it's a pretty tough build. But they're doing it with their latest loan. Another 650 tribal members are going to gain access to future-proof, basically fiber to the home infrastructure. And as I mentioned, we've got a long and productive shared history with with Hopi Telecom, going back to their original loans and them getting into the business of providing telecommunication services to their tribal members. So once again, as humbly as possible, we're sharing those examples to show different ways tribes have used our programs. And going back to some of our hopes, we're hopeful that moving forward, whether it's ReConnect or our other programs, we're able to play a part in your broadband plans wherever you might be. So anything that Laurel or Ajay would like to mention along those lines?
I just want to, these are exciting and really amazing examples of how tribes and tribal communities have used our programs. I love that that the first example, Ted, just because you can see how, the tribe went from a community connect, as Laura described it, a small project that served the community, right, connected the community center, grew, then thought maybe we want to create our own telecommunications company, found funding within USDA to figure out if that was a good, a feasible plan for them, decided yes, build the company. And then they used other funding that was available at USDA to begin that network. And then they use additional funding at USDA to have a business incubator. I just think that's the amazing, I think, journey that tribes and tribal applicants can have, right? Like building, it's like building blocks of how to not just support connectivity on their lands, but like really build on what an infrastructure, what a broadband infrastructure can do to support every aspect of economic development, I think, in their community. So I think it's just an amazing example of that. I also want to mention that on the DLT program, on the distance learning and telemedicine program, we recently announced over 50 projects, I think it was, Laurel, that provided millions in funding throughout communities in the United States. And looking at all those different DLT projects, there were several, I think there were about 10 or 11 that focused on projects that were either going to bring specific provide specific like distance learning opportunities on tribal lands and with tribal communities, or we're providing telemedicine services in tribal communities. And I think that is just also something that you don't get to really see unless you're in that community. Like, I think one of the projects was going to provide language, traditional language classes for the Native community, which is amazing to know that our programs are being useful in that way, and connecting Native communities with the with the healthcare that they need through the DLT program. So I think there's so many ways that our programs can be used in partnership with tribes. So.
Definitely. And can I ask a question? Actually, it's not part of our thing, but my question is, if I'm understanding this correctly, so could it be like, for example, with the Hopi, they created their own telecom, and let's say they have other surrounding tribes, would these programs be able to help them acquire more funding to maybe support those tribes that don't have that infrastructure, and they can kind of like tag on to gain that internet access and so on and so forth?
Yeah, it's also a nuanced answer, and I saw Laurel will help me with this. But the one thing we can't do is we can't help a community or a tribe purchase the assets of a current borrower. So we can't sort of doubly finance a project, which has been a challenge in the past. But certainly if a tribe wanted to expand its network and that geography overlapped with another tribe and that tribe was supportive, of course, there could be multi-tribal projects. One example I didn't talk about, which isn't tribe to tribe, but it's tribe to non-tribe community, is the Mohawk networks at the Akwesasne Nation in northern New York. They built a very robust cable system back in the Recovery Act days. And around that part of New York, which is right up on the Canadian border, there isn't much robust infrastructure around the tribe. So the tribe is serving off their reservation and is an asset and resource to those non-tribal people that without that tribal network would not have had access to broadband for the last decade. So it doesn't have to be tribe to tribe. It can be tribe and non-tribal partners. And guess what? Those folks pay their bills just like everyone else. So the more folks that are paying their cable bill to a tribally owned network, the better off it is for the sustainability of that company and the growth of that company and supporting tribal jobs. So really powerful example too. But Laurel, you came.
No, I to be honest with you, I think you hit the right example, which is that exactly what you're talking about is a very natural thing in this industry and something we like to see, right? For folks to expand out right? Sometimes we see people go too big too quickly. You know, you want to serve your entire footprint of your reservation versus, hey, start serving here and then work with us to expand out while you're getting comfortable. But the same thing happens with serving other communities, whether that's outside of their tribal jurisdiction in a non-tribal community or serving another tribal community. And I think honestly, Crystal, is a really unique and great opportunity for all of us, because I don't think we see a ton of that across the country. You know, I think there are examples, but there's not a lot. And I think as we move forward, what we are seeing is that some tribes do have some very sophisticated networks, back end offices, different things that can be leveraged. So, you know, I think that might be a really interesting opportunity as we move forward. The one thing I was just going to mention is, you know, obviously, no matter what, even if it is another tribal organization, we would still want that resolution from whoever is getting the service. So I just would mention that for folks to be mindful of, because we would still give that tribe that same right, which is to say we get a right. But I just wanted to highlight again, I don't think we see a lot of tribes serving other tribes, but I think that might be a really interesting opportunity that as we move forward with, especially all these other funding opportunities that are coming down. You know, sometimes these issues for communities not having service isn't about not having the money, right? Most of the time, people don't have service today because of 3 or 4 different things. They're a really remote community and they don't, you know, have access to funding, or they're a checkerboard community. I mean, there's another challenge there. So I think thinking outside the box and trying to leverage some of the infrastructure of other communities is a great opportunity as we move forward.
Absolutely. Oh, go ahead. Well, I was just going to mention that it goes back to one thing I've learned in working with, you know, the Seminole Tribe of Florida is that it goes back to, and working with other communities, of course, that it goes back to that whole, like your roots of, you know, tribes helping tribes and really just lending out that hand, trying to unite tribal nations, you know, throughout the country. You know, you're lending out a hand and you're breaking, I guess, things. You're breaking, you know, the habit of not, or you know, you're growing essentially. So I think that's something really cool, and you know, as you said, a really great opportunity. It just popped in my head, so I was like, let me ask that. But go ahead, Ajay.
I know, Crystal, that was an excellent question, right? Because you're asking us to think through, and even proposing that there are strong regional partnerships that can be built, right? And that can people can serve special areas, but support each other in that process. So one thing I want to flag, and please correct me, Laura and Ted, if I'm wrong, is that for the ReConnect program, although you can certainly, and we encourage those type of partnerships, we still need one applicant. So only one entity is the one that like submits the application, right? They can certainly do the partnership and come together and support each other, but we need it to be one name essentially, right? Laura and Ted?
Yeah, when it comes down to our ReConnect program, and really most of the programs that I oversee, we want one entity to apply, because at the end of the day, we're going to enter into likely a grant agreement. And so we want one entity that we say that we hold accountable to say, hey, did this project get done? But when we see the partnerships, they can flourish behind that, right? So for instance, if you have a community, let's say a tribal community wants to come in and apply for funding, and they're willing to be that one that enters into our grant agreement, they can still partner with a service provider. They could partner with another tribe. A lot of different ways of getting that done. But I think, as Ajay said, an important thing for folks to keep in mind, at least for us, is we're always looking for that entity that can apply. And it's important to us because that's who we enter into agreement with. That's who we hold accountable if there's something that doesn't work out in the back end. So I always say to people, you want whoever to apply to be the one who can own and operate the network, or at least be responsible that those things get done correctly, right? So even if you're not the one who's going to construct the network, you're responsible for finding the right construction crew to get it done. Makes sense?
And I know things keep coming up, but I just realized I want to encourage your listeners to look at the different additional scoring points that are available in the ReConnect, because we are actually, one of the things we're doing with this round is expanding the partnerships that we can have with all communities, right? And that also means, like we mentioned earlier, there are points for applications submitted by tribal governments and tribal stakeholders. There are also points for projects that will be submitted by local governments or by nonprofits and cooperatives. And so really thinking about the full panoply of partnerships that a tribal government can have, I would encourage your applicants to look into those additional points, because there might be points there.
Oop, I was muted. No, that is amazing. All right. Ted, did you have anything else you wanted to add on that front or anything along those lines before?
Just have so much we want to share. We don't want this podcast to end. So our apologies for keeping your listeners a little longer than normal, but why don't we move on?
Go ahead, take it away, Cora.
So no, as we're kind of coming to a close, can you please tell us again what are those very important ReConnect program dates that our listeners need to keep in mind, and who our applicants can contact?
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for this opportunity. So yes, with this ReConnect program, our third round of funding, we have $1.15 billion of loan and grant funds available. We are going to start accepting applications on November 24th, and folks can submit their application online through our intake system until February 22nd of 2022. We encourage folks to reach out early and often. We have on our website contact information for all of our general field representatives, so folks can find the name and contact information there. Additionally, we'd encourage your listeners to reach out to us, Ted Bulow, Edgel Casaperalta, or myself, Laurel Leverrier, and we'd be happy to put you in touch with the right folks on our team.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. And so, final thoughts? Yes, Ted, go right ahead.
I was going to ask Edgel if she had anything to add, but unfortunately, there's no big green easy button for us. I wish there was, and I've been listening. I don't think we said easy once during the whole podcast to date, because it's not easy. Building a broadband network is not easy. Running a broadband company is not easy. Applying for our funds is not easy. So when you do have those moments of how do I do this, how do I navigate this, you can answer my questions. Please just reach out to the contacts that Laurel mentioned, and we'd be happy to be as responsive as we can to get you the answers you need to make the right decision. So thanks bunch for having us again. Really appreciated.
No, thank you, guys. We really do appreciate when you take the time to sit down and explain things so thoroughly and provide so many examples. And it's just the amount of resources that our listeners are going to get. So thank you for taking the time to speak with us today and just have this amazing chat. Any final thoughts? We're good? Yes? Okay, so that brings us, everybody, to the end of this amazing episode. Thank you again, Ted, Edgel, and Laurel for joining us today. We hope you have enjoyed this episode. And as always, thank you for listening to the Hobothing podcast. Now, if you enjoy our show, please rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, and also visit our website, thenativeLearningCenter.com, to find more information on webinars and virtual trainings, and be sure to come back for more content. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Bye. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.